Welcome to episode 29 of the 15-Minute Coffee Podcast with Brandon Salazar, your go-to destination for expert perspectives and valuable insights from the world of business. Today, I'm here with Jeff Nguyen, founder and CEO of Boba Talks. And before we get into the podcast, I'd like to thank Mr. Nguyen for being a guest on my podcast.
No worries. And we can go by Jeff. Honestly, I'm not that great with formalities, and I always try to keep it really casual when I talk to students. So honestly, all good, but I'm glad to be here. Anything I can do to help students, help anyone listening to this. So yeah, however I can help.
Let's jump in with the question of tell me about your early life and career, what led you to and what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, dude, my early life was a mess. So I'm sure you've heard the stereotype, like when you're in your 20s, like it gets really messy. And I am the textbook definition of what 20s are like when things don't go really according to plan. So, like, kind of just to start off my kind of origin story, when I was a high school student, I wasn't really like the best kid in class. I got rejected by my dream school, and I was insanely tilted. But I worked really hard for 2 years to transfer into the UW Seattle. I got into UW Seattle, but when I did, it it really wasn't like what I wanted. And this theme is going to like exist for like the majority of my early career. Um, so I actually ended up dropping out of UW Seattle. It's like a combination of not doing well in school. I was not the best student. I was honestly more into video games. I was more into going to parties. I was just not a good example of what a student should kind of look into. But ultimately, like underneath all of that, I know that deep down, I think the biggest reason why I really left the college environment for me was that I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't like have any of that planned. And back then, not to make myself sound like a dinosaur, we didn't have like content creators. We didn't have TikTok. LinkedIn wasn't that flushed out yet. We didn't have a lot of the resources that are available today. And if I had any of those resources, I think my story would have been so much different. But after I dropped out, I got really lucky. I worked at a amazing video game company called Riot Games. I worked there as a contractor, and I worked there for 2 years. I think if you're familiar with League of Legends, you're familiar with Valorant, Riot Games is like an end game for a lot of people out there, and especially for a lot of students. And I never want to take that away from anyone. But for me, I think working there for 2 years, it kind of made me realize that working in the video game industry, esports, or working in a more fun environment, I guess, wasn't exactly what I wanted. And at that point in my life, I was like, shoot, what do I want? So I left Riot to become a wedding planner. And this is kind of like the most pivoty thing that I've done in my entire career. Because when I was a kid, you know how like when you're a kid, like you want to be like a police officer, you want to be a doctor, a nurse, a Power Ranger, and stuff like that. For me, dude, it was like being a wedding planner. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but like if you watched any rom-com in the 2000s, those monologues about being in love, standing in the rain, the boombox over your head, like I love those speeches. Those speeches gave me life. And those movies, I know they're super cheesy. I don't get me wrong, but like I still consider that era of those 2000s like the best era of like movies ever. So I became a wedding planner because I just really wanted to be entrenched in that ambiance, the romance, and hear these cool speeches from officiants, from brides, from grooms, from parents. And I loved it. I loved doing it for a whole year. The only wrong thing was I was super disappointed when I realized how inconsistent the pay was during the off seasons, and it was not a feasible or realistic way to make money. So at this point in time, there's this huge theme of me trying really hard to get into somewhere, me finally getting there, and then being really disappointed once I crossed that line. And the very last time this happened was when I actually got into Amazon. Um, when I got into Amazon, this was like a huge milestone for me personally. I was a non-tech kid. I was a college dropout. I went back to finish my college degree, by the way, at this point. I was a college dropout. I had that stigma to me. I was kind of on the I wasn't really on the older side, but I definitely got there much later than a lot of other people would have gotten there. I was but I made it. I'm from Seattle, Washington. You're either in healthcare or you're at Microsoft or Amazon. You're in one of those three professions. And for me, I was like, wow, I got into Amazon. I crossed that milestone. I don't have that much student debt because I kind of went the weird route. I was very unconventional the way I got here, but I kind of made it. Um, and then corporate life hit me. Amazon humbled me, and then it didn't humble me in the terms of like workload. It humbled me in terms of like, what am I doing here? kind of thing. Like I just felt so out of place. And the theme of me being disappointed once I kind of crossed that finish line, it was about to repeat itself, but I was insanely lucky this time because this specific instance, I had this super nice old lady who was my mentor. Her name was Shelly, and she kicked my ass. She knocked some sense into me. She was this like L7 senior recruiter, principal recruiter, and I felt really like lost, and I was like, I don't know what I wanted to do in recruiting. I didn't know what I would do with my career. But she knocked some sense into me. We had a really good talk, and just to kind of get to the nitty gritty, she, I kind of confided in her like a lot of my insecurities comes from a lot of pain points of me being my early 20s, and if I had to do anything with my career, I'd really want to make sure that no one else in that demographic kind of went through what I went through, feeling lost, trying to go do one thing, not wasn't what you wanted, not planning anything, not tracking anything. And she helped me kind of brainstorm of working directly with students. The first actual idea was to transfer to university recruiting, to be, an internship recruiter. But she actually inspired me to kind of go a different way. And I came up with the idea of having coffee chats with kids instead. That way I can keep my position at that time, because getting into uni recruiting is a fucking hassle. But just meeting kids, meeting students casually, one on one, even once a week, that was enough. Um, and I don't know why it blew up, or I don't know why it grew the way it did. But once I made that first LinkedIn post, I was like, hey, I'm just a guy from Seattle. I've been through some stuff. I recruit at a big company, but more important than that, if you're like a lost kid, I want to help you with whatever. And so that kind of just brings me to basically right now, because that was basically the origin story of the coffee chat program. And yeah, that's basically it. That's like the whole like origin story of like everything about why I'm doing what I'm doing.
I mean, it's a really beautiful story, and honestly, relate to it in a way because that's how I started this podcast. So I was actually inspired by one of my mentors. They're like, Brandon, you always are talking to business professionals, new leaders. You're always meeting new people. Just set up coffee chats with them to improve your connections. I'm like, yeah, why don't I do that? But why don't I also record it and let other people learn from it? So, I mean, it's just honestly a beautiful way how this has came together because I told you before the podcast, I met with a former podcast guest and we were just talking today about opportunities among other things. And this just brings a lot of opportunities out. So, I mean, it's definitely a lot of beautifulness to just being able to connect with people further.
Yeah, dude. The way that I learned about it is like going through your 20s is like there's really no one right way to do it. There are definitely bad ways to do it, don't get me wrong. But when doing it like the right way, it's so hard to stay on track. And I
Definitely.
like the way you said it. It's like the way you think things just kind of unfold and just happen, usually there's a pretty good reason for it. So yeah.
So, with like that being said, like talk to me a little bit about Boba Talks. What exactly do you guys do? How did it
Yeah.
start and what does it came to?
Yeah, so honestly, it started out as this like really innocent coffee chat program. It was like me against the world. For 2 whole years, I would set time aside every week and I would talk to students about literally anything related to like the student identity. So early career, internships, recruiting, applications, right? But honestly, like I think about 3 months in, I met this student, and I'll name drop her. Her name was Sophia. And when I talked with Sophia, it was like one of my very first conversations that were honestly so more sentimental, because we talked a little bit more about personal life, about family, about parents, about that type of stuff. And it in that very specific Boba talk, I kind of realized like that's the type of conversation I want to have. I want to get into like the nitty gritty about like why these kids are doing the things that they're doing. I want to help them get to where they want to go. Because I feel like, and I promise it gets back to like why we're what we're doing right now today. I feel like students have, the problem with me going to college was like I didn't have any resources. Problems with you guys going to college is that you have so many resources, and that means so many sources of truth, so much third party information, so many outlets. Like, who do you guys listen to? Who do you guys talk to? Your parents, your peers, your alumni group, your teachers, content creators, influencers. Like, who I could not imagine being in your guys' shoes. And for me, it was like, I'm not trying to be one of them. It's more of like, I know that there's a group of students out there that don't know who to listen to and don't know who to confide in. And for me, that's kind of like what Boba Talks is supposed to be. They're just supposed to be a resource and an outlet to kind of give that advice and insight for those students who kind of don't know where to go. And originally, it was supposed to be about career stuff, but honestly, now that it's grown about 3 to 4 years, it's kind of moved towards more of like the community stuff, the sentimental stuff, supporting stuff, like how to become an adult, and plenty of like career aspirations on the side, of course. But yeah, that's kind of what Boba Talks is. We're a mentorship program. We mentor students through coffee chats. Um, that's at our very core. But I like to think of us as kind of like a community and a safe space for people to go to.
So like what does it mean to you to see the impact of Boba Talks and other people? Like how does that like shock you basically? How does that be like, wow, that's really happening?
I think my biggest weakness is I do not take flowers. Like, I don't take acknowledgments, and I do not see accolades. I don't take it really well. I get flustered. I try to water it down. Um, but like, bluntly speaking, it's kind of insane how big Boba Talks has grown. And I think at the core of it, I kind of wish sometimes like it remained really small, just like an after school club kind of thing that if you happen to be a part of it, then that's great. But not that it's like I'm trying to like criticize how large it's grown and stuff like that, but it's more of like I can't believe it grew this big, or this many people know about it, or people kind of rely on it. It's sometimes it's overwhelming, I guess. um but between I guess not between you and me, but something that I don't really tell people is that anytime like a student thanks me, or I get like a message or an email, or a follow-up text message or something of like my calls with them, or they something good happened with the kids, like I always put it into like a little folder of like flowers, of where I can always like just look back at it and just like remember like how much good I've done for the world, or good I've kind of done for other people. And it's kind of it it's just wild that how big it's gotten. And I'm kind of glad that I've opened it up to other people. We've opened it up to other mentors, because honestly, like, it's kind of nice to see it enabling other people, or it being a platform to help other people now. So yeah, I can't quantify like how what it means to me. It's just kind of insane. Honestly, I still don't believe it. I think like I don't know why it's like so big, honestly.
But that's the brilliance of it if you think of it. That's really there's like a brilliance to the fact that you're still can't fathom the fact that you're genuinely impacting people's lives. Like I've seen some of the posts you've made like, that are genuinely quantifiably impacting people's lives. Like you did this, this happened. You helped them get to this, this happened. It's just like that's what I find to be amazing because it's a direct impact.
I wish man, this is so emotional. I wish I got to I think that like the hardest part about being on corporate is that a lot of the impact and changes you make with your 9 to 5 is super business driven, and it's to put money on the table. And I don't want to discount anyone's like 9 to 5, but I remember when I was working in corporate, like sometimes it was really jaded. I felt that the impact that I was making wasn't really aligned with like who I was as a person. And honestly, I kind of feel like eventually everyone who works in corporate will eventually kind of hit that wall. And I think with Boba Talks, it was kind of my way to have an impact that was beyond business and beyond impact, beyond like it's not monetized in any way. So it was doing good for the sake of doing good. And I'm just freaking bewildered that it is working. Honestly, I'm still flabbergasted by that.
That's a great point because I interviewed another CEO, Jerron Petty, the CEO of Color Stack. I don't know if you ever heard of their organization.
I love Color Stack.
Yeah.
My one of my students in my community, Kevin Peoples, he talked to me a little bit about Color Stack. I love them. I love the work that they're doing.
So I interviewed him on my podcast, and he was talking to me about how he got like a very, very well paying job. Him and the co-founder got very, very well paying jobs, and they turned them down to start Color Stack. And that was probably one of the hardest moments that they had to make because it's either you take a really well paying job or you take a risk that you're not even going to get paid. And he
Mhm.
said, I wanted to take that risk and I calculated that risk because I would rather make less money and but make significant impacts on people's lives. And we were talking a lot more about it after the podcast. And he truly has made so many great impacts on people's lives. For example, a few weeks ago, I was actually one of a few kids, one of like uh 50, 60 kids that were able to go out to the Figma headquarters in New York City and have an amazing time. I met some really cool people there. So he's definitely changing people's lives. So shout out to
No,
Jerome.
no, for real. I think like orgs like Color Stack, Girls Who Code,
Yes,
Rewrite.
yes, yes.
Um, and I'm sorry if like you're in Oregon listening to this and I didn't name drop you, but orgs like those that are doing so much good for people who honestly might not have those resources in the first place. You guys are doing brilliant, and I really do mean it. I think I've had the luxury of meeting with GWC, RTC. I think I've met the community person over at Color Stack once, but for me to like Boba Talks like aspires to be kind of like that, honestly. So
I mean, even the community members. So for my startup, we talked a little bit about this for the podcast. All my startup team is from Color Stack, except one person. And I mean, they're just the best people. Like I text in the Color Stack Slack channel, like a problem that we might have even for our team, and people are just there helping with it. So I mean, they're amazing. But with
they're stacked.
the next question
Yeah.
being, how has your time as a technical recruiter at Amazon and Google impacted you?
Ooh, yeah, this is a good one. Okay, so I honestly feel like people kind of okay, maybe people might expect me to kind of like water it down or kind of villainize them, but I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Like, yeah, there were really hard days at work. Yeah, the layoff was super stressful. Yeah, the interviewing for the roles was like honestly like a brain drain. But working at Amazon and then working at Google enabled everything that I had for my career. It gave me a voice. Honestly, it gave me so much clout on LinkedIn. It gave me a platform. It gave me credibility. And then, honestly, like on a more personal note, I was super lost before I worked at Amazon. I remember, have you ever been to like a mixer or a party and like you introduce yourself, but you don't have like an epithet like right after like, hey, I'm Jeff, I work in accounting or something like that. Like for me, before I
I
got into
love
Amazon,
this point. I love this point. That's me from first semester, first year to second semester. No podcast, no
yeah,
startup. No, it's a weird because you don't have any talking points. And I mentioned this the talking point, like something to say, oh, I'm this, I'm that, to almost
yeah,
like validate yourself for other people. And I really
yeah,
love that
exactly.
point.
The validation. I didn't have any of that too before. Like, oh, am I a wedding planner? Like, am I gonna say like, oh, college
I'm
dropout?
just
Like,
a guy.
I'm just the guy. Like I didn't have that. And dude, like back in in that era of my 20s, I was being tried. I was a social butterfly. I was going to parties. I was going to clubs. I was going to like rooftop events, and I felt so out of place. But I forced myself to kind of get out of the house and kind of just meet people. But it was super awkward for me, and I always not I didn't feel insecure necessarily, but it was like I always felt a little out of place that I didn't have like that epithet, that follow up, that identity, you know. And
I don't,
I know, as cringy as it sounds, when I got into Amazon, when I got into Google, it honestly gave me a little bit of confidence. Like, oh, I'm Jeff. Yeah, what do you do for a living? Oh, I recruit over at Amazon. Oh, I recruit over at Google. And for I know like corporate rat race, totally acknowledge that. For that very small window of time, Amazon and Google really enabled a lot of my self confidence, and that confidence honestly translated into me doing the nonprofit stuff. So, how did my time as a recruiter impact me? It enabled me to do everything. It gave me confidence, it gave me credibility, it helped so much with my self esteem. And I know that I don't want to take away like any horror stories from other people, but like for me, I had such a good team. I had such good managers. I had such good mentors who kind of pushed me to do the nonprofit stuff. Like I honestly was very supported and enabled. So yeah, I loved my time there.
So yeah, so this is that. I mean, that was great. I really resemble with the fact that I just want to go out and meet new people because like even a year ago, a little bit over a year ago today, I'm not the same person nearly at all. I'm the type of person that when I was just at University of Oxford and I was at bars, we're allowed to drink there, by the way. We're allowed to drink in Europe. When we were at bars, I'd be on LinkedIn networking with people, and my friends would be like, "What are you doing?" But that's just how it is. You have to meet new people to get somewhere. That's at least my mentality.
I I get that, and back then I embraced that advice. It was just so hard when I didn't know what to talk about, and
Yeah,
it felt like I was
it
meeting
gets
people.
awkward quick too.
Yeah. I was meeting people for the sake of meeting people, and it was just like, oh, hey, now that after I introduced myself, what do we talk about? So no, I get that. It was yeah. I'm definitely happy to be in my late
Yeah.
20s.
And then what would you say is the most important advice you could give to a young adult regarding get landing a job?
Honestly, the best piece of advice I can really give students is don't with the current political climate of today's job market, I think it really aligns with what I'm about to say, but I would say don't be too picky about your first job. I think respectfully, social media content creators, influencers have kind of warped and romanticized, big tech, days of my life working in certain companies, and they've really romanticized it. And don't get me wrong, working at two large companies, there were lots of benefits and a lot of perks. But I think realistically, a majority of students are going to land in places and jobs that might not be household names, or might not be really big, or might not be what I would what anyone would consider something that is commonplace, right? And I want to reassure students, like to a young adult, like your first job is honestly there to enable you, to help you whittle down your debt, to close any gaps in your resume, your skill set, to upskill you with new technologies or new skills that you would learn on the job, to give you corporate years of experience that are going to be used when you boomerang or swing out for a mid-level role. Your first job, and I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but I want to remind you, like, it's only temporary. So I think like a majority of people that go into corporate leave their first job eventually, like in the first 4 to 5 years, and even earlier if you're super aggressive, like before the like honestly, like during like what was the year of the pandemic? That golden year, everyone was like it was a candidate market, and everyone's giving advice was like aggressively boomerang. And I guess my sentiment is kind of the same. It's more of like, but it's more for sentimental reasons. It's like don't feel like if your first company is not where you want to be, respectfully, your first team is not where you want to be, respectfully, just know it's temporary. It's okay to kind of hang your boots there to get some type of experience, and just stay there and be there until it's the right time to leave.
Yeah, definitely. And then this would lead to the question of more of running a company. So, what is the most important skills necessary to run a company? And what would your best advice be to someone trying to run a company?
Wow, this is really funny. Okay, so I saw this on TikTok, and I'm gonna say this right now. If you ever feel like you have imposter syndrome, go into a room with a startup founder for like 30 minutes. You'll walk out feeling like your confidence is like, okay, I actually know what I'm talking about. And I think that's like kind of the segue I'm gonna go into here. Um, I don't really I want to acknowledge like Boba Talks has a lot of privilege being a nonprofit, because we don't have to think too much about stakeholders. We don't have to worry about monetization. We don't have to worry about like for profit worries, and that enables us to move and think a little bit differently. So I want to acknowledge all of that. But for me, I think the most important skill set to kind of run a company is that you need to acknowledge that you can't run a company by yourself. I think the most important skill set that a person who wants to start anything, a business, is asking for help. I just identifying like what you suck at and kind of start from there. For me, I think the biggest criticism I've always had throughout my corporate career is that my corporate business sense is not on the highest level of the world. That's why that's why Sunny No, when I worked with them, when they worked with while they were working with me, they they balanced me out. They gave me substance. They covered me in areas that I was weak at, and they gave me more maturity, gave me more credibility, it gave my ideas a little bit more structure. And it's kind of like that. It's more of like when you start a company, you just know like you're going to go through. You're shooting yourself in the foot if you're trying to brute force it by yourself. I think realizing it that things are better built when they're being built with other people keeps you accountable, gives you perspective, and it's honestly just more productive. Um, if I had to give advice for someone who's trying to run the company, I would say run it with other people. It gives you like it takes the weight off your shoulders and makes sure that your decisions are honestly sound. And most importantly, like group decisions are usually made in a little bit more confidence versus like decisions that are made a little bit more autonomously.
Yeah, definitely. Work with a great team. I've learned that with my startup. Man, I love the people on my team, but you have to work with great people to get great results. And I mean, that just resonates a lot. And also, like, another question about running a company is how do you effectively hire good talent? Because I've asked multiple CEOs this, and a lot of them just say, once you have someone who's good, take it. Make sure they don't leave. I mean, obviously, it's easier said than done, but once you have good people, you have to make sure they're treated well, make sure that they're respected, well. He said in a sense, well fed, that they want to be at your company.
I think I think my worldview here is a little bit different because like I work in a volunteer capacity, and a lot of the people I work with, I mean all the people I work with work in a volunteer capacity. And surprisingly, it can be kind of hard to kind of bring people on board, especially in a pro bono manner. And it can honestly be really stressful at times when you don't have enough people or you don't have the right talent to work on a specific project in the capacity that like I am not tech literate, so I cannot work on the back end stuff for a lot of the things that we want to build. So sometimes I have to like kind of look outwards and see and talk to people who are able to help me. For me, I think oh man, my worldview is it's pretty romantic, but I think my strategy is like if I can identify myself with the person that I'm talking to, like if this person is like hungry for an opportunity, yeah, totally. If this person really wants just like anything to put on their resume, totally. If this person just needs a chance, totally. But if I can identify with them on a more like I want to work on something, but dude, I have no idea where to start. No one's giving me a chance. Like I don't know what to do. Then I think that's like how I low key kind of make hiring decisions because all I've had I think 12 students volunteer with me, and almost all of them volunteered on the premise that they want to have a start with their career, but they just didn't kind of know where to go, and they needed like just an opportunity. And once it was conveyed, like it'd be volunteer, it'd be pro bono, it'd only be like 3 4 hours a week, like it's all I can really offer, then yeah, I think that kind of jaded out. I mean, it kind of balanced itself really well. Like these students are so talented, they're so smart, and honestly, they're way better at me than running the company sometimes. And they are well motivated, they have good reasons, and they honestly, in a really and in the most nicest way, they kind of sandbox with BT, and it always works out because if they never worked with me, then BT would not have grown the way that it did. So, how do I effectively hire top talent? Honestly, I just take chances, and if I see myself in them, if I see like that kid who just needed a shot, who needed an opportunity, who needed a chance to just work like it, yeah, I would do it because honestly, when I was hiring at Amazon and Google, especially for like the L4 roles, I wish I could be in a more prominent capacity where I can give these people a chance. Like they did really well in the interviews, but like the hiring vote was just a no. Or they did really close on their interviews. It's just like they just were so short of the technical bar. I
And that's
think I
sometimes
know
how it is,
it is, and it sucks.
fortunately.
and it sucks. And I know it's not the same thing with me being in a volunteer and nonprofit capacity, but I told myself like I ever got to be in that position where I get to make a choice about giving people a chance, I would definitely give people a chance, even if it kind of blew up in my face. And it's never blown up in my face, but even if it did, I would still totally do it 10 times over. So yeah,
I mean, yeah,
not the best, not the
I
best.
agree. I agree with that somewhat because, well, not 100%. So my thing is, if you're willing to learn
Mm.
and you have a brain and you're passionate, that's the
Yeah,
perfect person because the person willing to learn and who's passionate and driven is going to outpace the person who's just money hungry, somewhat driven, and look smart. Because I mean, like you could get good grades and everything, but if you're passionate and driven and you're willing to learn, you're willing to say, "Hey, I found this." You're willing to say, "Hey, I want to learn this, but I know I'm not good at this, but I want to learn it." That's just honestly gold to me.
I love
But
that.
that's all I can say about it. But
I love
and
it.
that's honestly all we have today. But so thank you for sharing your valuable insights with us. That wraps up episode 29 of the 15-minute coffee podcast. Brandon Salazar. We hope you enjoyed gaining insights from our guests and exploring the world of business with us. Don't forget to check out our podcasts on our social media at the 15-minute coffee podcast on YouTube and Instagram for upcoming episodes. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.